looks like 75%.
That one going too?
Yeah, what?
Oh, that was fine. Say to start without them, or?
10 o'clock, we'll call the ad hoc construction committee only. Approval of the minutes for August 6th. Discussion possible motion, review design options discussed at August 6th meeting. Discussion location and budget.
Alright, we'll probably combine them if you guys are okay. We got a lot of stuff to give to you. So when we met with you guys in August, talked about a 20, a 25, and a $28 million option for jail only. And then there was a request to look at the clinic campus and what could be done at the clinic campus. So I put photos on top of the columns so that you can understand what we're speaking to, but Kyle's gonna have it up on the screen. It'll be easier for him to walk through each one of the options. So with the directive that we need to get the cost down, like we shared with you last time, the scope is going to have to be reduced, and essentially the scope is we need to reduce the amount of square footage that we're gonna build. It's the only way we're gonna save money if we make it smaller. And you guys said, tell us what we get to each one of these, what do we have to give up, what does it look like? So our goal is today is to show you some different things that we went through, and then at the end, we've got kind of some detailed potential reductions of the concept that we had shared with you guys before. So let's start with the first column here on the left-hand side. This would be our $20 million option. Now, since the last time when we've been pricing deals and we've been bidding them out, like I had shared with you guys before, is the cost of the projects in square foot cost continues to increase, right? So this is a project that we have recently bid. This is a design and a concept that when it was bid, came in right around $1,000 a square foot. So to give you a little bit of an idea of what happens when you reduce the size of a project, the cost per square foot, there's really an economy of scale. When it gets bigger, the cost per square foot can go down to some of the common expenses like utilities, air handling equipment, all those sorts of things. You still have to have them in there, it's just distributed over more square footage. So this, from $1,000 a square foot, was the parameters that we use when we start to program to get this number down to the dollar amounts that you said. So what you're gonna see is that the square footage that we originally had has significantly decreased. The last time that we showed you the option, we were just under 40,000 square feet with the revised model. Now we've really scaled these back quite a bit. So you'll see on this one, this $20 million, it's 19,700 square feet. It has a bed count of 38. It has 2 receiving cells. It has 8 areas of classification. There will be no additional staff needed, and what we mean by that is that the staff count that you currently have with your jail does not need any additional staff to operate and function this design. This one does not include a kitchen, and the jail expansion on this is not capable because of the configuration of our pod. We've got a couple that are expandable, and we'll show them to you in the other options, and that construction cost is $20 million. Let's just go through each one of these quickly, and then we can come back and look at the details. The second option, Kyle, if you want to bring that up. The second option is keeping it in the northeast corner parking lot, just under 25,000 square feet. It gives you 51 beds. Now, the reason that we focused on that around 50 beds is your jail right now is a 50-bed jail with 2 receivers. So kind of a comparison. So we're looking at basically a replacement of your bed count, and then how do we increase the amount of receivers. So this configuration shows the Sally Port on the north end. The booking would be the red area as you start to come in there. We have 7 receiving cells in that booking area. This concept does have a space for a kitchen and a laundry off to the right. And then we've got the medical and jail support component there in the blue. And then the red octagon shape there would be your housing unit. Now in this concept, at day 1 would be 51 beds. It is expandable. There's a concept here where we can add the balance of that circle, but when you would add the balance of the circle in the future, you would have to displace that existing building. So it is expandable. This one would be expandable up to, was it 95 beds total? What did we get to?
Yes.
Yeah. So in the future, it could grow to 95 beds, but day 1, it would only be 51 beds. It would have 10 classifications. You could still operate this jail with the same number of staff that you currently have right now. Now, this configuration does not have a pre-booking area, so we had to give up something to get the square footage down. We maximized the housing, but reduced the pre-booking area, and there is limited property storage on this one. We would have to it's not the property storage size that we would like to see, because we had to cut back some square footage. Again,
There's a kitchen.
there is a kitchen.
With this, yes, no pre-book, but it does have the kitchen.
And that's not going into the street, right? That's
Correct. That would be in from a setback perspective, correct. So the thing about this configuration, the next 2 that we're going to talk about, is the questions would be, what do you do to replace the parking that you're displacing? And now your front entrance on both of the next 2 concepts that we're going to speak about now has to be your south door. So your south door does meet ADA compliance. The individuals, the public would have to park across the street. You would have to look at what would the displacement be of the individuals that come from, or your staff, and where do they park. So the western lots that are on the opposite side of Third would have to be a consideration for that. So let's move on to the next one, Kyle. We're just going to go through them quickly, and then we can dive back into some details with you guys. This one again, this is a mix of utilization of a new build and renovation of that south wing. We're looking at reutilizing some of that south wing for some of your jail support. So this, in a sense, is a new housing pod that's placed in your parking lot. Reuse of that 96 or 95 wing, I can't remember, I think it's 96 wing, renovating that, and then actually going into your existing jail and renovating some of those cells that are in there so that would be utilized as well. Now, we did a smaller segment. You'll see it's just a quadrant of those, because again, we're driven by square footage. There's just a quadrant there of that housing, so it's a smaller new housing unit, but we're reusing part of the old jail, and we're only doing the minimal updates that we would have to be able to get these cells utilized for single bunking up on the jail. And the bed count on this is a 53 bed operation. It has 7 receivers. You would have 20 classifications. So you've doubled your classification from the last one. You would have classifications in the parking lot. You would also have classifications that we're talking about individual cells that could be reused in the existing jail. So we do get to 20 classifications. This one does require additional staff. So if you guys look back at when we talked about can we use the old jail, this one would still need a post in the jail, which would be 5 additional full-time FTEs on that wing that would be in your old jail. The balance of it could be utilized with your current jail count from a staff perspective. So everything that's on the east side of the campus would be your current jail staff. Everything that would be on the left side, you would have to add an additional post. This is expandable. We can expand to the north, where Kyle has shown that, in regards to what the increase could be for those spaces. So displace, we don't have a solution for the displacement of those departments that are down in the south side. We would have to work through that through the next design phase of where would they go, what could the location be for those departments in there. But again, this is really focusing on how do we get to the square footage and the renovation that's tied into that. And this would be your $28 million option.
And with this one, and we hadn't quite discussed it as much, but the real driver here, to Kurt's point, was to get to the $28 million option and attempt to get to a like bed count that you currently have.
Yeah.
So in order to do that, that required that renovation piece of the existing jail. And so by renovating the existing jail, then the bed count goes down in order to, because we have to now become compliant with current Department of Corrections square footage standards. So that's where when Kurt said it actually adds positions, because you basically have a post up on the second floor here, plus you have a post in the new jail and the parking lot. There is an option that could be considered here, which is build the component in the parking lot, the new piece, without any renovation, but then the bed count would be significantly lower than we have today.
You can kind of see the sizing of what Kyle's showing. This is a smaller pod unit, so it's less beds. You can still access the existing east entrance through kind of a little alleyway that would be in there, so there would be a space for some parking up there, whether that would be staff, and then, you know, the recommendation may be that the public still comes in that south entrance, and that would be staff entrance on the back side, because otherwise it would be difficult for them to navigate through there. So it does affect the overall parking component and how you are able to come into the building. So this would be your $28 million option.
Has pre-booking.
Yep.
It does not have
Good
a
point.
kitchen.
Yes.
So there again, those two areas are roughly like square footages, so just for consideration purposes, one could have pre-booking, which is what we've indicated here. The other one that we previously looked at did not have pre-booking, but had.
And then the last one that we have on the spreadsheet here is really that campus, clinic campus. So I think the request was,
I don't think you need to talk about that.
well, I want to tell you that I think that your question spurred at least some ideas with Venture and ours. And that's where I want to get into more of a working session here towards the end of this in regards to this overall concept and what the decisions may be from the ad hoc moving forward. So the imagery that you're seeing up there, that dark outline that Kyle is showing up there, would be the existing clinic that you guys own. So the question was, what departments could fit in there and what could be reused in that space? So you'll see what they've identified there. You would look at the sheriff's department would have some space in there. You could put district attorney, you could put clerk of courts, jail admin staff, and then some staff locker rooms. The challenge with doing anything specific to courtrooms in there is the floor to deck height doesn't allow us with what the Supreme Court guidelines like to see in regards to our courtroom design. So you will see that the blue area would be the future addition of those jury courtrooms. You will see then that there would be a judicial suite on the bottom side is where the judges' chambers and staff would be partially. And then the orange box that's there, that's representing this 51 bed jail. So we kept the jails the same size on all these options so that you guys can have an equal comparison of what would the jail look like if we parked it out here, okay? There is availability for jail expansion at that space. And then obviously, the other side there is jail support, which would be intake, booking, salary board, all the components that are tied in with there. So at the end of the day, the exercise that we went through is that it could fit on the campus. Now, when we put a number to it, we had to put a number to if you did it all at one time. Now, there is a potential that if you wanted to have this as your master plan, you could pick and choose what do you want to do as a phase one. And the concept could be, could we build a jail out there, just a jail, and not do any of that work? And that could be a consideration that you guys have here today. Now, that led us to the discussion of something that came up when we were here in August about the lack of support for a skywalk, right? So as we look at each one of these options, it is, you know, we've got the 20, the 25, the 28, and the 62. I don't know collectively if there's one of these that jumps out to all of you as a clear-cut winner, but it had Kyle and I start to ask the question of, what if we took the design that we had across the street and we just start reducing the square footage on that? Meaning that we get this down to a 50-bed jail. We reduce the size of the kitchen. We actually pull out Huber. We start to look at some square footages that would really skinny this up. And then the decision could be made, does this go across the street? Does it go up here by the clinic? What's the best location for that? Now, the reason that we came back to this concept is that there's been a lot of time invested in this design to make it efficient, to make sure that it flows, to make sure that it gives you the availability to grow. And I want to have Kyle go up and show you the housing unit that's up there. So
You're saying that for option number one, that could be put over here.
Yep.
Okay, for the same cost of 20 million.
Yep.
Including everything that you have here.
Yes.
With the option then too. So it would basically then, that would have a kitchen as well, right?
Correct. This one does not have a kitchen. Option one does not have a kitchen.
Oh, that's right, okay. So, no kitchen. Alright. It's $5 million cheaper too.
Yeah, correct. Right now, the way that, and we can go back and show you that pod unit doesn't have the availability to expand in regards to it adding on. It's just a configuration here that if we were gonna add on, it would have to be redesigned to be able to have the expansion. And if you guys don't mind, I wanna go through the exercise of what Kyle just brought up, go back to that layout. I just wanted to spend some time with you, sharing with you the brainstorming that we did in regards to what could be done in regards to future expansion. So this is the jail housing unit that was proposed across the street. And we asked ourselves, if we cut this down to 51 beds, we essentially would take the square footage that's on that east side, and if you went under the premise of, we're not gonna put a skywalk on it, the skywalk goes away. So the skywalk is no longer there, the elevators are no longer needed out of that housing unit. And if we said, day one, we're gonna open with 50 or 51 or 53 beds, you pick the number of whatever that is. But we wanna have the ability in the future to add on to that, meaning that in 10, 15 years, if you need more beds, you could come in and add on. If you look at the corridor that goes around that housing unit, and I think all of you, maybe except for Mr. Moore, toured the Tremolo, that would be that circulation portion around the housing unit. So that line that he's showing right there on the left side between the yellow and the red, that would be your secure perimeter. That in the future, if you wanted to come back and add those cells in the future, your jail could stay in function while it's being built. Until at the very end, you could then bring the openings into that corridor and add those doors as a final phase. So this could be a strategy to be able to start small. It still gives you an efficient design, but I want to show you the beauty that you would have of this in the classifications. So we're dealing with needing more space for classifications, and in this design, we address the special needs. We addressed the multiple classifications that are needed. And maybe just go through the exercise, Kyle, and show them where you could give classifications and the numbers that we could get there.
Yeah, so as you see where we have a day room, that is essentially would be one classification, because you'd have a mixed group of inmates going into that day room. So you'd have one here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on the lower level, and then another 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. That would be here. So 14 right off the bat, but then we also are identifying these special needs cells. So this could be any number of things. Somebody who has a health-related issue, influenza, it could be a detox, it could be suicide watch. So by having these anterooms outside of the special needs cells, how this would work, and we're not showing doors on here, but these anterooms would open up to a day room. So with this, there are 4 cells that could use one day room, or you could potentially, hold on, that's not, so I'll move that to here, and then we can actually expand that to say all of those could potentially have their own classification, and that would then bring that number up to, if I go back, if I hit that could expand that 14 up to potentially 18 different classifications. So without really building anything different than how it is designed here. So the amount of classification ability for jail administration to properly classify and locate all of the inmates would be greatly enhanced with that at roughly the same population as currently.
The reason that we headed into this discussion is that on every one of these options that we have right now, transport from housing to courts would have to be to a squad in the Sally Port and bring them back into your existing Sally Port up the elevator to courts. So we no longer have the connection in any one of these options. So where that comes into play is this jail, because that was really the key element that's driving where we were showing it across the street, was that connection. If the desire is we don't want to spend money, it's a waste of money, then we feel that the discussion of that is, then if we're gonna have to do transport, let's determine where does that transport come from. Is it across the street? Is it option number 1 where it's in the northeast parking lot, or any one of these in the northeast parking lot? Or is it the clinic site? Or is it a different site entirely, right? But then under the premise of master planning and long range, so that you guys are set up for the future, the design that we choose to utilize for that housing unit is gonna be important so that you can continue to function while you add on in the future. Now, and that you don't have to add any additional staff. Now in this model, because you have the officer station that's there would be no additional staff needed for this with an additional building. And we can get this, what did you say, we can get up to 85 beds if that addition is added on there?
87.
87 beds. But the challenge with this model is that in order for us to get the square footage out of there, because in this model we still have 9 receiving cells, which I believe your receiving cells are of the utmost importance, right? And I think it's a topic of discussion about what is that right number. We have always seen that 10% is a good rule of thumb. But recently, the jails that we've been working on is that those receivers have become even more, they're a more important real estate portion, is that we've got counties that are asking for more than 10%. We've got ones like Trumbull, for example, we had that at 10%. Go back a year later and ask how's it functioning. They said, well, if we had a couple more receivers, it would have been great. So if we focus on the receiving and we focus on the housing, keeping those kind of as a prime focus of the design with the ability to expand. The difficulty with receivers is you can't expand them because it's in the heart of the operations, right? So you've got Sallyport, Pre-Book, and then housing that's connected to it. You can't easily come in and add them, so that's a fixed number. In your housing unit, there is the availability to do expansion. The challenge with this is that in order for us to pull back the square footage to get this down to these numbers, is unreasonable for us to get to that and maintain all the functions that we have in that program. We would have to pull some program out of there, right? Because when we did a rough exercise, we get this down to between 34 and 35,000 square feet. Now, if you use that in the parameters of your $1,000 a square foot, you're in that $34 to $35 million solution. You're not in that 25, 28 number. But this would be a way for you to potentially look at how do you get into that concept. So, there's a lot of stuff there that we threw at you. I think the thing to think about, and when we talk about the reduction of first costs on the jail, if you think back to what your mill rate impact was for $38.5 million, for every $1 million that you reduce your investment, it's gonna save that 1.8 cents, or to round it off, 2 cents off of your mill rate for every million you take off, right? So if you think about that, if you're gonna go from a $38 million down, and let's say you're gonna carve $5 million off of it, you're gonna save about a dime off of it. So from the 73, it's gonna go down to a 63. You see where I'm going with that? Is that when you make those decisions, a $5 million decision is about a dime on that mill rate component. So that's a premise of that over kind of the big picture investment of what those dollars look like. So I know that's a lot of stuff to take in.
So I'm just, and on the option, with the jail addition of the future pod expansion on the northeast.
Yep.
Can you pull that one up again?
That's when he's got
Oh, there, okay. So the expansion is going into the existing building?
Right.
Okay, all right. And that could take us up to possibly how much?
That went to 95.
95 beds. So that would start out with, I mean, as far as qualifications, are the state mandates, does 10 fall within what they're mandating right now?
So that's the problem, is it's a number of classifications. Is every time we look at the classification number, it's a variable depending on when you walk in the jail, right? I believe 10 is too few for what you need right now. I think you need something more closer to 15 to 20 to be able to manage properly with the receiving cells that you could potentially manage somebody that you could classify down there from a special needs side. So I think 10 is a bit small on your classification.
So let me ask you this then, on this lot number 1, you showed where it was possible to, that you could actually add additional classifications via
That,
separating up,
I think he's talking about that model.
yeah.
Yeah, that's this one, right?
Nope.
No,
This one is not.
that's not on here.
Yeah.
That was
Oh,
your-
that's on, okay,
This was
alright.
the kind of, we brought this one.
Okay, so let me ask you then, what are there is there the possibility to add additional classifications in that design, like you did with the other one?
We would end up adding, additional ante-rooms like Val said, and we have to break those cell blocks up. So I think it's a possibility, it's just a matter of what's the cost impact to do so. Because you're gonna have additional construction that's tied into that. So it is, to answer your question simply, it is a possibility.
Well, that's gonna raise the price.
Yes.
On that third option there, all the militaries are additions to what's there now, correct? Is there any way to downsize that to make more use out of our existing building?
Downsize what portion?
Well, the square footage is up 27,000 here. Is all that necessary? Do we have to go that big on the
Yeah, so
for our existing buildings?
the challenge with this concept is that we did already skinny up the housing unit. You can see it's much smaller than the one in option 2.
Right.
Because this is a reutilization of the jail on the second floor. So in order to skinny that up square footage wise would be even less of a bed count, right? So we're trying to maximize that bed count that's what we were trying to target 50. I mean, we could make it smaller, but your bed count's gonna go down. And I think that would be the discussion of what's the threshold of how small do you want that bed count to go. This one has 7 receivers, so it's a matter of what do you wanna evaluate in regards to the program of the receivers, cause this would be 7.
So, if we have 7 receivers, is it conceivable that if we didn't have all those in use, that actually they could become, like a single cell for one classification?
They can, but it can only be temporary. So the challenge with the receiving cell is that a receiving cell doesn't have the daylight or the day room components that the DOC requires for long-term housing. They are allowed to bring them in for a period of time while they're monitoring them, and then they have to go back to the general population because you do have to have the daylight and the day room requirements. The receivers don't have that, but the DOC allows you to manage your population to be able to flex in and out of those receivers. So you could have somebody in there that's a separate classification for a period of time, but it would be determined by the length of stay if that would be a long-term solution.
But you've got that option up to 20 classifications, more than any of the rest of them. Is that necessary?
Well, the 20 was just showing what we could do with single bunking in the old, and then showing the segments of what Kyle had shown there. So if you wanted us to make larger day rooms in the addition, we could do that. So we could reduce the classifications in there if you wanted us to.
And that one, excuse me, it does require additional staff, and there's still linear cells, correct? I don't know about anybody else, I kinda like the idea that this one here is a kitchen.
Go back to that one, number 2. Hold on, the kitchen. Expand the kitchen so I can see it better. See what you got.
So if you remember Trumpelo's kitchen, when we walked through there, we made that smaller than Trumpelo's kitchen. So we were skinny up the kitchen
I
side.
know everyone's gonna laugh, but I don't know why you even need that big of a kitchen.
So when we say kitchen, that does include walk-in cooler. So one of the discussion points when you design the kitchen size is how long do you store your food? So there has been times where we reduce the size of the walk-in cooler or freezer, and then deliveries would have to be more often. So that could be a concept to be able to reduce the square footage. So yeah, these designs here, we've taken some examples and put them in there. We would have to go through finer details of design if you gave us a direction to move in that, in one of these.
For kitchen size, just the rough square footage, part of the discussion with that as well is if you are utilizing part of your inmate population in the kitchen, which some counties do have, it requires a little bit more room just to be able to have some level of separation from somebody who might be handling the washing, and somebody who might be handling the prep work for carts, getting trays and everything queued up for the next meal that would be coming. So is it the most efficient kitchen layout for an operational kitchen? No, because you have these areas that you're queuing up the pieces to go take meals into the pod, for whatever meal is being served, and then everything that's coming back and getting cleaned, that's it. So there's some operational inefficiency that's a part of that when you have that piece of equipment. So can it be skinnied up, as Kurt said? Yes, but it becomes more of an operational piece of that.
I think the other discussion is, are you ever gonna expand it, right? So in this model, we're showing that we could grow it into the 90s. You need to make sure that you can provide food for that. If you're never gonna expand it, then obviously that square footage is different.
Right, so on that one though, it does say additional staff, no, however, is no staff required for the kitchen? Other than the inmates?
Okay, so when we put additional staff, we're talking about the operation and the function of the jail. Typically what we have seen with those kitchens is that those kitchens are provide staff by an outside vendor, which is actually tied in with the cost of your meals. So you're not gonna see an increase of potentially county staff work. Some counties may choose to do that. Others bring a vendor in, and that's part of your budget when you're dealing with your meal perspective. So you have a meal cost on one or the other. You're not bringing a correctional officer in. When we're talking additional staff, we're talking correctional officers. So.
Okay, so then, just having the kitchen doesn't necessarily mean then that we would actually be saving any money.
Yeah, if you look at what you're paying right now versus what the cost per meal is, you will be saving money. What the exact number is would be determined on the vendor that you bring in there. But the model that we have seen by other counties, utilization of that vendor and the food versus what you're paying, there would be a savings day one.
Yeah, no, it's $7
We're paying $7 per meal right now,
per meal.
and,
Didn't you say you could get them for like 2 or 3 with them?
well, yeah, probably between 3 and 4 usually, yeah.
With our kitchen,
Yeah,
outside
that's-
vendor coming in.
You know, it's like, you choose that vendor hires the people that work there, that are not our employees, are not county employees, and they come in and they do that. And like Kurt said, that's built into the price of your meals.
So this is on, I'm late to the game here. So
Mhm.
this is
East side.
second floor, east side, first floor, east side. Well, this is the park.
This would sit right in the parking lot. That's there now.
Got it.
Both option 2 and option 3, we're building in that northeast parking lot.
Yeah, it's about 16K.
Okay. How much of the existing jail is being used with this second option?
That's what the girls.
And some are,
I like this one.
And the third one, that's just a pipe.
It was 13,000 last month, but.
There's nothing we can use in the old jail with this second option
Well-
to cut down the cost of the new addition?
You think the reuse of the jail, that's why the third option is there, because when you get to that third option, we did reduce the housing on the third option. So what you're gonna run into is 2 actually leads you into 3, because we're renovating that portion that's in there. So it would be a matter of what would that reuse look like?
Okay, what's the price, or how many beds is that one then?
The third option?
Yeah.
51. I'm sorry, 53.
53, it's only 2 more beds.
So-
that's gonna require 5 more staff.
That's
That's all.
staff, and if you do the jail expansion, what's
So you're actually running 2 separate buildings.
That would we get to 87.
87? So with the second option, you can get to 95.
And that would not require more staff, right? Because it would be part of that pod, or you'd be expanding the pod, so it'd still be 3 people.
And what, number 2?
Yeah.
We have 10 classifications right now. We have an issue, big issue. Option number 2 also only has 10 classifications.
You're killing it.
I'm just saying, we'd be building the same exact thing that we have now.
You're killing it.
How many classifications are there that the state DOC says?
That are identified.
But
I mean, I know it's a floating target.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a moving target.
I think we had the discussion before you got here is, the counties that, we've been working with, they're planning for something between 15 and 20, right? Of what you're gonna flex in and flex out. And then with your receivers being another opportunity for that classification to be isolated in that space for a temporary period of time, so we don't meet other DOC requirements. I think your target number would be something between 15 and 20 where you'd wanna get. Now, to Tom's point, you could take that option 2 and you could make those day rooms smaller. You could make them 2 cell day rooms, so we could increase the number of classifications there. The only thing that I just want you guys to think about with each one of these options, and I think the master planning has to be considered, is that on anything that's built in that northeast corner, if you have to do something with the courthouse in the future, where do we go with it? And what do we do with it? Because that's what we wrestled with, of how do we show you without getting outside of county-owned property, of in the future, when you need to do something with the courthouse, when you need to do some changes, you're dealing with a renovation of the existing building is your only option outside of closing a street and acquiring other property. So, I do think it's something to consider. Which, that's why we were talking about, if there is a model that you wanna see size-wise on the jail to target, do we look at that across the street, or do you look at another site from those perspectives? So, not trying to complicate the matters, it's just something to think about from a master planning perspective.
And all of the options that are presented here today are working under the assumption that any defendant transfer from the jail to court to show up at court would require transport. And that includes the options that are on the block. You would put somebody in a patrol car, take them around the block, bring them into the existing Sally Port, and use the existing elevator to go up to what is now booking, and those, the 2 receiving cells that are there would become the holding cells for court. So there is a transport cost even when you're on the existing block.
Even on that number 2?
Even on number 2.
Like on number 2 then, if at some point we did expand that, that would not cut into our existing court, right?
No.
Okay, but would it take away that factor of having to transport? Would there be a connection into the court?
There would be no connection into the court.
So again, we were driving towards a number, right, to keep it down. It was really driven by square footage of what we can maximize on, to get you the most bed count and operations for the jail. Now, there is an opportunity where you could dive into and renovate your courthouse to get it there, because you're right adjacent to it, but it's gonna cost more money. And that's what we're, from the premise of dollars, you're saying this is how we get to the dollars. If we add the scope, is it doable? It would be, but it's gonna cost additional dollars to get to that.
But it's gonna cost dollars to transport too, though, I mean.
I think it comes into the staff to be able to do that. How often are they doing that? Absolutely.
We would have to hire additional staff just to do transports from the jail to court, because we can't feasibly and physically do it with the staff we currently have. And it would be extremely hard to hire a human being to say, hey, come work for us. All you have to do is transport inmates. On Monday, you transport 2, so you're gonna work for 45 minutes. On Tuesday, you're gonna transport 9, so you're gonna work for 4 hours and 15 minutes. On Wednesday, you're not gonna transport anybody. On Thursday, you're gonna transport 3, so you're gonna work for an hour and 15 minutes. You're never gonna hire somebody that's gonna accept that position, because it's different every week. We transport inmates to court from the jail multiple times every single week, but some days it's 1, some days it's 6, some days it's none, some days it's 4. We won't be able to hire anyone that's gonna want a schedule like that, especially a law enforcement officer when there's 8,000 job openings for full-time employment in the state. So that's gonna be a real tough logistical piece for us to figure out. Plus we'll need a vehicle, and we'll need more than one person. because we can't expect that person to work 360 days out the year, 330. That's gonna be really hard to try to fill a transport position like that, unless it's a full-time or 2 county employees.
You guys have a preference on any of the options?
I don't, like any of the 4 that you brought. First one, there's no kitchen, and you're building 38 beds, there's no point in going backwards. Number 2, your classification, it's the same size as what we have, so that really wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. And it's the same size beds as we have now. You lose your property storage and your pre-booking, which pre-booking is kind of important. 3 would work because it's gonna require 5 additional staff. And if any of them, it would be the clinic renovation, but we can't afford 62 million. We've already, the last one that they showed you, we spent some time trying to cut that down, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Kurt, but I think we got that where we think we can hit the 34 to 35 million, which was kind of in the ballpark of where you wanted us to be at the very beginning, when we started doing that. But again, they all require transport, that's the hard part. We can make that the duty of the county board, they can all take turns during the week to transport cars.
I think it's really, it's a square foot number, right? So how do we reduce the size of the building so that it's still functional, operational? You know, and that, the target, you know, that the 25, 28, whatever the numbers are, the premise of what each one of them are, taken into consideration, what would the next phase be? So, you know, the evaluation of what the sheriff was talking about, how do we scale this down further? Do we take this one and feel it down further to the point that it is somewhere, because this doesn't fit in the northeast corner, right? But is it across the street without a skywalk? Do we pare this one down further? You guys wanna take one of these other options and have us make adjustments to them to be able to address the needs to get to that point?
This option here does have a pre-book, correct?
Yep.
Does have property storage, correct?
Correct.
Does have a kitchen.
Yes.
The sole issue with this one is transporting across the street.
And we did talk a little bit, Kyle, about some things that we can work out of that already.
Yeah.
The Huber area, the yellow there, which is, I don't know, 600 square feet. Probably, we are looking to go, with our Huber program to electronic monitor only, where they will be placed on, they have to meet the criteria, but will be placed on the electronic monitor, which is the cost of that person. There's no cost to us, and then there's nobody coming in or out of our jail every day with the chance of bringing something harmful into the jail. So that's something we could probably cut that out of there, which would cut the square footage down. Again, we talked about kitchen, you know, depending on how you wanna do that. But one of the huge things that I know that we've always looked at since the beginning is future expansion to this if needed, and to the renovation of the courthouse if it comes. The building of the, leaving the side of the one side open without putting any housing in it. There's a few counties that have done that. Eau Claire County did that. They built the pod, but they didn't finish it on the inside until a later date when they needed it. Like he said, it can be built so that when you're ready to renovate, they come in from the outside, they don't disrupt, your jail at all until the last phase when they have to cut into the actual jail part of it, but, which would minimize the disruption of your jail. And it gives you everything you need. It gives you, more classification space, which seems to be one of the big topics. So I don't know, it's a tough decision, I get it.
I don't know how we can build a jail though and make it work without that direct connection from the jail to the court. Without adding staff.
Yeah, so Jeff, to your point, if these yellow areas were either reduced or shelled out, if you were take 300 square feet out of the kitchen area, and that's an operational piece, deliveries twice a week, 3 times a week, and then the housing piece, that's a net of 8,600 square feet. And if what we're showing here is 43,000, that does bring it down to 34,500.
But I think the spaces that we have in here that aren't in the other ones is the jail support in the blue, that square footage that isn't in the other ones that we have in here. And I think that's the concept of, do we pare this one down? Do we skinny this one up any further? What's the threshold of, what do you guys wanna see? Cause I know last time it was 20, 25, 28, see what you get for it, and then you wanted to talk about what to add or remove from one of these options. If there is an option that you think makes sense and you tell us, can we add this, change this, and then go back and do a reconfiguration, I think that's kind of where we're at in regards to which one makes the best solution.
So how bad if we strip this one down to 28 million? What's that all gonna pull out?
Well, we'd have to cut another 6,000 square feet out of it.
I mean, that's kind of what we're here, is showing all the pretty pictures, but, you know, we're still stuck on the 34 million, 35, 36, whatever. And the whole point of this was, is we need to scale this down. The public's not gonna be happy with the 36 million. We've already been down this road. So we gave you the ball figure of the 25, 28 million, which having there I like, but now how can we scale this one to the 25 to 28 million?
I think the things we would have to do if we're comparing 2 to this one, we would have to reduce our receivers, right? Because this has more receivers. So if we're gonna go apples for apples, you'd have to go down to 7 receivers. We would have to look at that admin space that's up there, you know, start to pare this down so that, this one here has a pre-book, and I'm gonna tell you, John, I think we need to have a pre-book, the other one doesn't, you know, so
I get that.
that's an adder that's, I think, essential. But I think it's the spaces in regards to what do we do for.
So let me say it this way then. What's the basic bones of what we need on this building to operate? Make it legal tomorrow. We can add on stuff from that point on.
So, let me ask this question. My takeaway from the last meeting is, okay, show us what we'll get for 20 million. We're showing you what you get for 20 million. What do we get for 25 million? It's there. 28 million, it's there. And then you ask to talk about the money. Well, that's what it will cost to put it out there. I get it. This is what you're gonna get for that dollar amount. And in my opinion, we're not cost to put it out there. I get it. This is what you're gonna get for that dollar amount. And in my opinion, we're not getting anything more really than we got for that amount of money. I get it. Nobody likes the number. I get that. But I think they brought to the table what you asked for. So,
I'm not saying they didn't.
huh?
I'm not saying they didn't.
Well, it's,
I'm just trying to compare different options here. Correct. To see
But
both
it's-
sides of the spectrum going. I get, everybody wants this great big fancy one. That doesn't mean you should buy the biggest fancy.
I don't go out and buy the newest car, Cadillac, just because it's a Cadillac.
I get it. I'm not saying you have to have the best of everything, but now you're taking away from things that make the operation of this jail more secure and more safer for the people that have to work in it. So when you're thinking about this, think about, is that somewhere I would wanna work? Would I feel safe working there? Because that's what you're hiring people to do.
The other thing you gotta think about is this gonna work 20, 30 years down the road?
You know, it might work for the 51, you scale it down to where it works for the 51 beds that you're gonna, with the ability to go to, what was it, 85 or 90 beds or whatever. But if you reach that number in 25 years, is this gonna be able to handle that amount of number because we scaled back at this time?
So to kind of go back to answer your question, big picture is, we feel it's essential that you obviously have a secure vehicle salary port. We've scaled that down, so it's not as large as the ones that you guys have toured. The receiving area is one that could be challenged, right? Because somebody could say, do we need 9? Or that could be an area where we say, do we find a 7 number? Is 7 realistic? I think the padded cell is, you need to have a padded cell in there, right? In regards to how that functions and gets to that point. The video visitation or that yellow box that you have up there, Kyle, I mean, that's one of them that we would have to say, how many of those stations do you want in there? I think that would be the pain threshold, and I think that's where we're at, to kind of manage how we get to the jail design. Is the county board has the authority to pay for it. The sheriff has the authority to say, I'm willing to occupy it because it functions, and you guys have to come to some agreement on how does that work, right? So that it's really what's the give and take of getting to that point. And I think we're getting to that point here where we've reduced it, is how painful is it, and where is that fine line to get to where both of you can agree with what does that make sense for. You know, you're gonna need the locker rooms for them to get into those spaces. You do need the nurse's office. I mean, those are spaces that are required to be able to function. Do we make them smaller? And to Phil's point, how painful is a long time? And so if the direction from you guys is get this thing under 30 million. If it's 28 million, we need to find 6,000 square feet out of this program to get it there. And maybe that's the effort we have to go through with you guys to say what
we willing that what the committee's asking is that number has to be 28 million. Is that where we're at?
Because then the directive from us would be carve out 6,000 square feet here out of this design, or unless you guys want us to stick with one of these and make adjustments to one of these.
So with, just with what we had before, John, to your question, what would we need to take out of here to get to 28 million? It looks like this is just rough square footages. You take the property storage out, changing room, and a receiving cell, so you'd have 7 receiving cells in booking, plus a pre-book. And it can be argued whether that stays or not, but taking pre-book, losing all video visitation and non-contact attorney visitation piece out of that, we'd have to have some form of that, but that would be worked out as to how that would be included. But if I'm just taking that space out, removing the entire kitchen part of this, plus the Huber entry, we had this weather secure vestibule that goes through pre-booking. That is intended for any staff, outside staff that would be coming through. They would check in this way, go through pre-book, in case policy would require them to go through a body scanner to detect any kind of contraband. So that would all go out, and then you go upstairs, remove all jail administrative offices and locker rooms, keep the nurse's room and mechanical spaces. That cuts out a total, and on top of that, the expansion space in the in the pod that we had talked about earlier, that all nets 16,000 square feet, and that brought that down to 27,000. All of those pieces were moved from the 43. That's 27,000. So if you need to get it to 25, then you're looking at probably taking out pre-booking and laundry potentially.
Well, I'm not saying we need to do any more. I'd like to start at that number like where you got. Now we can start adding stuff back in versus, I know we probably need stuff mandatory. So now can we say, go through and put in what we think we need that's mandatory? Versus just, an option because we want it.
I don't know if there's any action there that is wanted, it makes the operation happen. But yeah, if you wanna cut back that far and then sit down and start piecing things back in and see where we're at. And that's the trouble.
Well, I know, I'm just spitballing here, Jeff. I'm trying to get this figured out like everybody else is.
Let's go upstairs once, Kyle, because if we're just gonna go to the bare essentials, obviously your jail staff need an office, right? You already have the nurses in there, so it would be a matter of, do those offices become shared, or are those offices smaller, right? I think the conference room would be one. Do we need a conference room there or not? I mean, that's the exercise we're gonna go through. So there is some space needed in the green, so we can't get rid of all of it. How much can we? We will need staff lockers, and the staff lockers, I think, were sized so for male and female for the shift that we were talking about for the space in there. We would have to revisit, because just to pull them out, I don't think is doable. But do they get downsized? I think what Kyle is saying, if we got rid of all and we get to 27, and you're saying let's add back minimal to get to that point, what does that number look like? Is that fair?
Correct.
That's an exercise that we can do with the sheriff. It wouldn't be effective for us to do that here today. We could take that with that advisement of starting here, and then what can we add back into those spaces and see where we can reduce the square footage to this model. You guys would like us to.
It's good layout, I can't deny that, but I have to think about this a little bit the rest of it.
I mean, there's a piece that I don't even wanna bring it up, cause I don't think it's wise, but we do have mechanical space that is enclosed in there. If you wanna reduce costs, mechanicals can go on the roof, but the life expectancy of your mechanical equipment goes down significantly. I think there is an investment in doing that, but I at least wanna bring it on the table, because if we're gonna cut the operations of the jail, we're talking about reducing costs, that would be an area we could look at. I'm not advising it, but I'm at least explaining that so that you.
It's a big chunk of square footage.
But it's almost, I'm talking like double life expectancy. You can get your equipment to be, last twice as long by having the mechanical space.
That's just my opinion, or the people said here.
No, I appreciate the dialogue. Is what we need to do.
And just wholesale cutting out the kitchen is not something that intentionally to say, oh, we can't have a kitchen or anything like that, but it to get to the numbers, it requires large footprints of square footage to come out. So is it right sizing the kitchen to a better spot? And as we talked about, smaller coolers, smaller freezers, smaller dry storage, and then it becomes more of an operational piece on operating the kitchen. And
I guess the thing that I'm kind of thinking in the back of my mind, Kyle, is do we talk about maybe the kitchen gets slid up, that if we need to add additional kitchen space, if they ever add housing, could it be, do we make the kitchen smaller, then in the future they could add more onto the kitchen?
right.
I'm just thinking out loud here, based on what they're considering, and then do we reduce the size of the freezer and walk-in cooler? It would be more often deliveries, but that would be an area where they still have the benefit of the kitchen, so they could save the money on the meals. We'll work on that. as long as everybody's comfortable with that approach.
Is, with that exercise then, is there well, I think we know, ceiling threshold is 30,000 square feet? Is that
I think I heard 28.
28?
I'd like to see if we can get to 28. Is that fair?
As we're adding things back in, because if we're already at 27 without
I would say
kitchen.
30s, just me. Other people aren't, but might be good with 30.
30s,
Just gonna put the
30s,
cost at what?
30s.
That'll go above.
That's on that?
Yeah, if you factor that it's about $1,000 a square foot, that's the premise of, because we're talking about this being, not this year, so we have to have some accountability for what that, so in that premise, if it's 30,000 square feet, figure it's a $30 million.
Just as we're beginning to add a piece that, all of a sudden can be a large component, programmatic component, that all of a sudden you add it and puts it over that threshold, how do we whittle away somewhere else, or have the conversations with jail administration staff and with the sheriff to say, how many video visitation stations should we have? How many attorney-client visitation areas should we have? Is it one, can we get by with one?
How many do you have now, Jeff? For attorney-client?
But that's also public
It's
visitation?
also public visitation too.
Yeah, so,
Oh, okay, that's a double use.
Yeah.
in the lobby.
In the lobby, and I think one of them currently right now is filled with storage.
Yeah.
Cause we have nowhere to put stuff.
So one function.
Yeah.
How does everybody else feel about that? Target something at 30,000 square feet,
Start at the 27,
27 to 30, yeah.
and then start making the quilt.
It seems like we're just going back to square one.
You guys originally had started about 2 years ago, so 28. They got it at 28.
No, well, actually, it turned out to be, I think, one of the final ones was 32.
Oh, yeah, we've had multiple iterations of that.
Yeah, but I mean, we're going back again to basically with the loan, the $60 million.
Okay, so where do you wanna be, Tom? That's kind of where we're here.
Yeah, I guess,
Well, that got shot down last time, how is that changing now where we're gonna get it through this time?
That's why I'm asking you guys, there's 5 of us here.
Right.
I don't see, where that's gonna, I just don't see where this is gonna benefit us cost-wise. It's gonna end up being I'm not saying I don't like the designs or whatever, but it's just that it's this cost factor that's really it's overwhelming.
The last one that they came through was actually 38, wasn't it?
Yeah, 38 and a half is what this guy wanted, yeah. That's what was presented at all public meetings. The 38 and a half is what was the mill rate impact of 73 cents.
Right.
So if you pare that down, it's gonna go down, and then, I don't know if you're here when I said that, but for every $1 million that you pull off of there, it's just under 2 cents on the mill rate. So if you pull $5 million out of it, you're gonna save about a dime, so it's gonna go from 73 to 63 per 100,000. Kind of giving, if you get this down to 30 million, you're gonna take that down to 16, so you're gonna go from 73 down to 57 or somewhere in that. We want Bear to run the final numbers, but that kind of gives you an idea of where you're at of the decisions that were there.
And for context, I believe that is what the plan that's up on the screen was, the 38 and a half.
Yep.
Correct. And that can see there's the little skywalk piece, so we estimated that at three. So if you, wait, here, the magic of a white box.
You gotta remember, at that time, we were doing $825 a square foot, and cost has gone up, so all that has to be taken into consideration.
So now at 1,000.
Well, again, the project that you see on the left there, we just bid that one out. That one was about $1,000 a square foot. So what happens is the economy of scale, the smaller the project, it seems to go up because there's some variables that stay the same, like your utility number is the same no matter what the square footage is, right? So you start to see the impact of that. So to be conservative, I'm giving the direction to say, if we're gonna go in that direction, let's use $1,000 a square foot for these planning options. When we get into getting a final floor plan, I'll actually have my team put a final budget to it before we finalize it, but I feel comfortable with us using $1,000. Gary, you were gonna say something?
Well, I think we have to be careful that we don't get totally fixated on the dollar amount and end up with an inefficient jail or stuff that doesn't work, and in the long run will be a lot more expensive. I think I like the option that's not on here, on that, but I don't like taking out the kitchen. I think you said you took out, some other major thing, booking? Something major, but.
Property storage, and there was the visitation piece.
And visitation
and the jail administration offices and lockers.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we do need, I think you said laundry went to.
Laundry, not yet.
Oh,
We got
not
to,
yet.
Yeah, not yet.
But I think some of those things are absolutely necessary, and, I think it's gotta be something that, the sheriff and, from a public safety thing are comfortable with. And I think, again, the longer we talk about this stuff, the cost keeps going up. I like this concept, but I think, we can work with it, and, like you're talking about adding back in some things, but I think, there's certain things that, again, this allows for expansion. I don't want to come back to this in 5 or 10 years and saying, why did you build a jail too small? This has more classifications in it, which I think they need. It's got more receiving cells, which I think you guys want or would like, that and everything. So I think, we can work with this and add on. But again, I think we gotta be careful we don't fixate on the costs to the detriment of everything else.
You bring up receiving cells, Terry, just like we were talking about our inmate water visitation area. We have 2, but we're down to 1. The last 3 days we've been down to 1 receiver cell because we've had a suicidal inmate occupying the other one for 5 days.
Well, and does any of this in here have room, conference or whatever, but for training or other
We do have program space in it.
program space in it? Because right now you really don't have any program space either.
Program space is gonna be code required. There's certain things we can't take out.
Okay, so, but yeah, because I know now there isn't, or very little program space. And so I think you need that, and even room for the guest to meet with his attorney or not. I think, you gotta have stuff like that too. I think, those things have to be taken into account.
I'm hearing you say, move forward with scaling it back, but then adding in minimal, but don't compromise too much to just cut something totally out, right?
Just not cutting for the sake of cutting. I think, again, you don't wanna shoot yourself in the foot because, and then all of a sudden find out, well, it's gonna cost us 10 million more 5 years down the road if we didn't do it right.
I think the other important piece that we would need, we should have feedback from this committee on, is one of the pieces that we had kind of indicated here was, we'll say, with expandability, the beginning day one bed count, what that number wants to be for expandability, and number of classifications and number of receivers, sort of have that as a benchmark that we can't fall below that.
So in the model that Kyle's showing right now, we would start with 50 beds day one, but the expansion would get you to 87. Are we comfortable with that model?
Yeah, and recognizing that the 50 is pretty much where you're at today, it would not be
It's a replacement of your jail size wise, so.
Yeah. But
But
it's
that-
the expansion of the classification.
But, right, but that's also limited to 85%, right?
Correct,
Yes,
so
correct.
42.5.
42.5 beds, okay. And I think the classifications is very important too.
Yeah, in this model right now, there's more than enough classification. You're gonna have 20 classifications.
Yeah,
I thought it was 18.
He's got the ones on the other side of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
where, if we, something like, where would this go? Is this like you're thinking about putting across the street?
I would tell you, to Tom's question, could it be put by the clinic or across the street for the same price? The answer that I would say would be yes, as long as we know there are utilities, and if there's a site that's there that you wanna put in the utilities, we're in the same parameters. As long as we're not, changing the scope in regards to, we're gonna be, addressing a 5-acre site, and we're gonna completely do a 5-acre site versus a half a
Greenfield.
block. That's where we start to run into costs, but if we're just gonna isolate that, the challenge is, when we're talking about transport, is that the further you move it away, the longer the time they're gonna have committed, cause you are, making this decision, you are investing in transport.
And we have worked out at least here to the block south, proposed blocking of master plan of square footages for, future look at what that entire block could look like.
It
Now,
would require acquisition of
it
private
does
property.
require property acquisition. Now,
Some of those are for sale right now.
Yep. with the clinic site, that, with the county, where the clinic is, there's, what's the road? That doesn't go
College.
through.
Port Arthur.
Port Arthur. North of that, that's county land as well. And so, is there more, would you have to vacate Port Arthur Road? Don't even wanna bring that up. I don't know.
Good.
There's a crate that goes out there too.
The what? Oh. But we haven't even looked at what this would, how that would work out there. We've only done the clinic option plan here, where it was going to the south down towards the river. So, I guess that's a whole nother,
I think
probably it's beyond this group.
I think
to
for our
master plan.
exercise,
We
moving
can do
forward,
our
would be,
efforts with it, I mean, think of it this way, the fact that it's a blank background is helpful, because it's regardless of where the location is, but.
But this option has to go on a neutral site, it can't be fit into.
It would not, the option we have up here does not fit
It will not
on
fit
this
on this
block,
block.
correct, as it is currently shown. This option does fit on the west side of the south block, that's there, so, but
The west side of this.
the west side of the parking lot
Yep.
to the south here.
So did you guys look at the possibility of at where the clinic is, as opposed to using the existing clinic for, like judicial offices, or rather just make those areas like possibly, kitchen
The construction type of that would not meet the, would not meet what we need for a secure facility. We were looking at office components.
Oh, I see. Gotcha.
If you guys don't mind, I just, because I know you're thinking dollars and cents, and I just met with Highway on Monday, and I just wanna explain, what I presented to them. Because one of the things that happened at a couple of meetings was, I think all the board knows that you got something to deal with on the jail, but you also have something to deal with on Highway. And that was brought to my attention a couple of times about, have you been out there? You know what we're up against, and my answer was, I haven't been out there. So I asked if I could go out there and tour the campus, which I did. And then I presented to Highway kind of an idea of master planning for your highway shop. So you guys all recall, it was 1A jail, 1B was highway from your master plan, and there's numbers associated with how do you get to that point. And let's just start with this front page. This front page obviously identifies your highway shop property. And the large dark building up in this upper right-hand corner is your main highway shop, and then you've got outside buildings. Most of them are predominantly pole barns. You do have a couple of salt sheds that are there. You've got one that's a Quonset hut shape. It's Kyle's got it up there now. But the strategy from Wald's perspective was to take and add an addition on to the very west side of your highway shop. And that was a phase one in regards to getting to a solution that was in there. We finished a highway shop for Washera County. They just occupied it the first part of this year. So they were we worked with them on master planning, and we looked at all their facilities. Highway shop was one of them that rose to the top. They decided to do it. And there was a phased approach about how do you potentially get to the long range. Now, the reason that I came before the committee is when I was with Justin, he talked about the investment in your infrastructure out there to be able to deal with some of your immediate needs. You had some moisture mitigation to deal with. You've got some windows, roof, whatever is leaking is getting within the facility, but then there are operational components that are tied into that. So I walked through there eyes wide open about evaluating your buildings, evaluating what are potential options to give you a step one, because part of what's happening, I think, when we're talking about dollars is there's more need than what you can afford at both campuses. And if you make a decision on the jail now, you're 8 to 10 years away from when your financial advisor says you can do another borrow. Fair? So the only thing that we have to do is figure out a game plan of how do you get to 8 to 10 years and still function the way you're functioning without wasting money in an investment. So what I had told the highway shop, or the highway committee, if you wanna look at this, is go to the very back page of this sheet. This gives you the layout of what we did at Washera, and we broke it down into colors. So this blue was their office shop. This gray area here is their repair bays, and there's a wash bay on this end. And this is basically the vehicle garage. So this is the garage that would house all of the plow trucks, would house your excavators, would house whatever equipment that needs to be under roof would be in that space. When Washera did this, we bid this as an alternate. So if you see down the middle of this building right here, there's some dots, those are columns. We bid this as phase one was the gray, the blue, and the bottom side of this tan. And then we bid this top half as an alternate if they would add that on. With the premise that where these dots are, these were all precast panels, that in the future, if they wanted to add on to that, these precast panels could be removed. The steel would still be bearing, and we would move those precast panels to this outside wall, so you have the same panels that could be used for an expansion. When they bid this project, this bottom half down here, this phase one, was just over $22 million. When they did this bay up here, it was like 4.4, so they were between 26.5 and $27 million to do this job. They decided to do it all at one time. Now, the master plan for this was, here's phase one, you can build this in the future. They did it all at one time. I'm thinking in reverse for you guys, because when I walked up and I started asking Justin about your operations, the glaring issue with your operations is that, and maybe you guys aren't aware of this, but when your plow trucks come in at the end of the day, They go to the yard, they drop their plow, and then they pull their truck into the backside of that repair bay for it to sit until they have to come back for another day or the event. So they're constantly attaching, detaching all the equipment that's in there. It's crazy inefficient, okay? So that was the thing that I looked at in regards to operations. The second thing that I looked at is that the roof to wall flashing in the windows that are on the east side of that highway shop, we believe is your moisture issue. So I know there was some consideration about replacement of the roof of the building. I have been involved with many counties on master planning, and what happens is if you guys make the decision to replace the roof on that entire building in 8 to 10 years, the comment's gonna be made, we spent $500,000 or whatever the number is on that roof, why would we do anything? You're committed to it then. So when you're thinking master planning and long range planning, and you're saying in 8 to 10 years, our financial advisor said, we are gonna be in a position where we can do a $25 million project. And you know that this project in today's dollars was 27, and you could potentially scale that down. You've got an inflation factor you gotta take into consideration, but how do you address the needs day one? The thing to consider is go in and fix your leaks. If that means put new roof to wall flashing, if it means replace those windows or cover those windows or deal with the leak. It's gonna be a small investment to be able to deal with the moisture mitigation issue. And then understand that you're probably more than likely over the next 8 to 10 years gonna have to do that a couple of times because your roof probably needs replacement, but it doesn't make sense to invest it if in 8 to 10 years you're gonna replace it entirely. With that under consideration, if you go back to the logic of let's just build one of these. Now this is a drive-through. If you go to your second page of this handout, second page of the handout would be your option one. This would be, we got a equipment list from Justin on all of your trucks and your excavators that would need to be housed in this space except for your pickup trucks. Now you do have pickup trucks that we'll show you on the next page that they want to have under roof. But if we're gonna skinny this up and make it an initial first step or a phase one on your highway, this could be a solution that gets them in and under roof. Now, I also heard at a meeting where you've got old equipment, and if the strategy is over the next 8 to 10 years, you're gonna invest in equipment. The investment in a house the equipment so that it has a longer life cycle makes some sense. So the question would be, how do we do that in the most efficient manner, that's cost effective, that protects our investment that we're gonna look into our fleet? So this would be the size that you would need to build to be able to house those trucks and your excavators. Your pickup trucks then could be housed in that old space that you're having them right now, or they can be put in some of your other warehouses there for the period of time until you get to your final solution. The second, you can see the square footage here, it's like 23,500 square feet. The second solution would be how big you would need to make that bay if you did all the pickups in there. Now the pickups, again, you could decide to do all this at once, but the pickups could be housed somewhere else. So your first step would be just the option one of phase one. This could be another consideration, but it's much bigger. The flow, so you understand why this is designed this way. The size of these bays, it's intended that this truck can pull in with the wing and the plow on, stay completely intact, and when they come in for work, they back in and they pull out. And you can have a consistent flow there. It's also sized that on the off season, when they want to take their plows and the wings off, there is space up front here that a cart and the plow and the wing sits right in front of the spot where the truck sits. So it's no longer outside. They're all housed there, and that's the spacing of what's included in this design. Now, if you go to the next page, you'll see the comparisons of what we did at Washera. Washera's equipment list is much larger than what you guys have, so their square footage was needed at the 106,500. So they did 106,500 square feet for, I think it ended up being like $26.8 million, what the number was. So if you look at your scope and you said you needed to do your highway shop, which would be office, which would be repaired, which would be a garage, and which would be a wash bay for 75,000 square feet, that could be a master plan placeholder for you to say, we need to target something like that and be prepared to build something like that in 8 to 10 years, right? Now, if you go to the next page, then it's a matter of where do you park it. So the problem with putting an addition on this side right here is that all of your traffic that goes through your highway yard is right in that spot, so you're gonna choke off all your flow. So we looked at how do you do a phase one that is in a space that doesn't affect your operations, still makes sense to be able to get into this space, and then you can add on in the future. And I'm not a real fan of where this shows completely, because that one shed right there that we're showing replacing, that's your state salt shed. It's actually in pretty good shape. So what I told the highway shop is, or the highway committee is, make a consideration of where to put it, right? You may need to replace it or take a building down, or to configure it in phase one where you don't have to take a building down, but when you're gonna do it in 8 to 10 years, the building comes down, right? And then it's not an issue. So you could put it here, and then you can add on in the future. Now, this component can be built in multiple different ways. A pre-engineered building is gonna be about $200 a square foot. If you go with a precast building, which I would recommend, which is a precast concrete, because the metal building starts to deteriorate over time, that's about $250 a square foot. If you do a block brick scenario, it's like that $275, so the precast is actually gonna give you a better long-term solution for your value. When you go in to look at that, I would also highly consider adding a wash bay onto that. And the reason I would add a wash bay is that you can do an undercarriage wash when they drive in, and then the driver gets off, washes it off. So if you're investing in 4 or 5 vehicles over the next 5 years, they're cleaning them up and the salt isn't deteriorating them. The wash bay that we put at Washira was anywhere from $750,000 to $1 million, depending on, that's the bay and the equipment that's in there. Now, all of that said, it can be anywhere from the pre-engineered building would be $4.7 million up to 5.8, 5.9 for the precast. And if you did the block, which I don't know why you would do it, it's about $6.5 million. If you add the bay end of that, it's anywhere from $750,000 to $1 million. I'm just stating that because that could be a way that when you guys are evaluating these to compare the two of them, how do we address both the needs? This could address your 1A, this could address your 1B without it being a decade before you touch it, and you have a game plan of getting to that. So again, I'm not your highway, I've been hired to talk about the jail, but I wanted to be able to explain to you that if we're gonna step back and look at master planning, where do we put the jail? What do we do with adding on to the jail in 8 to 10 or 20 years, or whatever that is? What do you do with the highway shop? I think the more data that we can get in front of you guys to consider while we do this exercise of reducing it will be key for you to start to evaluate how do we get to that point. So, thank you for letting me explain that to them. Also being a
Where are the graders? Some of the graders have their own housing.
Yeah.
Some of the graders would fit.
They're pop.
Some of the graders would.
They do have a couple excavators in there, it's a matter of placeholder.
Fit some of the, yes, but some of the others would have any other shed.
So, again, this isn't a final design, this is a snapshot to give you imagery of what that looks like for a drive-through. The reason is you wanna have a layout where you have a drive lane so that everybody can function, rather than you can skinny up your programming space if you stack them, but then everybody's gotta back out, or one guy's gotta drive out 2 vehicles to get to one of them, so.
I don't know if anybody took the tour, had a tour down
I've been through it.
there. They seriously, unhook and hook their plows every time they gotta go out and snow plow. It's a 2-hour job at least. That's not including the guy that's gotta come in and do all the snow. They
Oh, in order to get their truck in a shelter, they have to take the plow off,
Yeah.
and the plow sits outside.
And if it snows X amount overnight, somebody's gotta come in with all that snow away from the plows. Then they gotta get them all hooked up, provided they don't get stuck just trying to get them.
Yeah.
So, it's a hassle. I actually, I heard that when I went out there on that tour, and I just.
For the reason, again, I don't want to confuse everybody with bringing that in, but when you guys are evaluating what your borrowing looks like when I say that, you're borrowing now, you're borrowing recommendation from your financial advisor, and what does your borrowing look like in 8 to 10 years? I think having a game plan of how do you get there is important, and this would be a way to evaluate that, of how could you get there. And again, if we've got direction from you on getting this thing scaled down to under 30,000 square feet, that's what we'll work on with the sheriff and bring it back to you.
Well, we definitely can't wait 8 to 10 years before we do anything out there. I mean,
Agreed.
we need to do something. And this might be the right time, along with the jail, to get something passed through a little bit easier. I mean, that we're gonna, you know, fulfill the obligation out at the county shop somewhat, or they got to start on it. And as well as the jail, I think it'd be a easier sale than if we combined them and did them over.
A lot of my constituents said something for the highway.
This year would be a huge.
Yeah, just from being
So
out
this
there.
one, on this lot, or this first one here, that jail is not expandable?
So the way it's configured right now, that housing unit is not expandable from the pod component because of the layout of the way it will allow how it's laid out.
Okay. It's not because there's additional buildings?
Yes, you'd add another, yeah. I mean, you can always add on, but you're adding staff, right, in the future.
And this would actually then take out that business? Right?
Yes.
I am too, I really am. I wish number two.
Is there a way to add, on number 2, is there a way to add in access to the courthouse? That wouldn't entail
Yeah, we
driving
can,
around,
we can evaluate how the
putting in
connection.
an elevator and,
So the way that that courtroom is laid out there is that the bench, correct me if I'm wrong, Kyle, the bench is actually on that east wall, so we would have to figure out how do we get past the bench, but we can look at that for you before the next meeting. It is on,
Probably additional money, but would there be a rate of pay or something else down than another, to keep it like a 25 mil?
we'd have to go through the same exercise. This one already doesn't have a pre-book. We would have to look at what we would, we could do the exercise for this of how we connect it to there while we evaluate the other option too.
could you,
You're still gonna have transportation from there.
Over there too, right? Drugstore?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, horse and teeth.
The classifications are limited to 10.
could you explain to me what property storage entails? What is that? Is that,
Property storage is when you're brought in a booking and you change from your street clothes to
Yep.
your jail clothes.
Yep.
They all go into a bag
Yep.
that is accounted for, and your property is stored in there until you are released from jail. So that has to have a space for that.
could the old jail be used for that? I mean, for that, it's still good. Couldn't we have property storage there?
You wanna have the property storage adjacent to booking, so what we would have to do is potentially carve that space out, because the jail was already clear over on this backside, the adjacency wouldn't make sense.
Why does it have to be adjacent?
You said, if, you could haul it over there if you wanted to, it's just efficiency, right?
Right, I realize it's not efficient, but you can't tell me somebody doesn't have 10 minutes sometime during the day to take a tote of stuff over there and put it in a locked place.
But based on how that is, they're gonna have to take it out, put it in the vehicle, haul it around. And that, so we do that, he goes to court, goes back, gets released, and they gotta go get it and bring it back before he can be released. I mean, it's, being right there makes sense. When you bring them in, you got someplace to put it, and when you go to release them, it's right there, you're not having to go chase it down. I mean, that's,
I mean, how often do you actually need access to it while they're there?
Multiple times a week,
people come and go.
all the time. You know, someone will be part of this unit, they're domestic, they get changed over, and they're released in a day or two on a signature bond. That happens all the time.
Alright.
And there is no
I'm
access.
just asking, I don't know.
Some of the old jail could be used for storage, you know, paper storage, extra, mattresses, extra uniforms, you know, things like that for the operations of the jail that aren't needed on a regular basis, but the property that these people are changed in and out of really needs to be there.
And we have property storage right now in our jail, but obviously not enough, because we're using one of those attorney inmate visitation areas for storage too.
Sure.
It's like a house, you can have enough storage.
So if you guys would like us to, we could look at option 2 as a possible connection to court. We could look at the property storage and how do we address that, whether it be in the old jail. And then I also heard us evaluate if we could increase classifications for that one. Anything else you want us to look at for option 2?
Okay, what did you say phase 1 of the highway department?
Oh, now, sorry, now we're mixing jobs.
No, I just want.
So it's a matter of what you do, Tom. So if you did a precast building at the 23.5, it's like $5.8 million.
Oh, okay.
If you added a wash bay to that, figure somewhere between $750,000 to $1 million on top of that.
So roughly, what, 8? Just call it 7, yes, 7, okay. So, I guess, maybe selling the jail is gonna be a tough sell, but if we include that phase 1 of the highway garage with that.
Exactly right, I think it'd be a much easier sale.
I think, we could, that would be a good selling point for this.
Alright, so we need to give them some direction.
I think that, that option 2, I think that's worth pursuing, keep it on the block here.
So out of the three items that I talked about, we'll look at a connection to the court, property storage, addressing that need, and then increasing classification. Anything else to address on 2?
I think probably the first 2 would be the nature ones.
It's also lacking a pre-book. I mean,
I think the way that we would have to address that is, if we put a pre-book in there, we would have to reduce receivers, but we can lay that out and show you what that looks like and how many receivers we have to compromise.
that one currently has how many receivers?
7.
Right now, you've got one usable one.
Right now,
As of 2 hours ago. I don't know where we're at now. Right, buddy. If they brought somebody doing the jail, they both be full.
Right.
There's no kitchen.
2 does have a kitchen.
2 does
Who's
have,
got a kitchen?
Does have a kitchen.
that was no property storage or no.
What we could do is maybe skinny up the kitchen and get some pre-book out of that. We'll have to evaluate that.
Can I just say this? It seems like we made really good progress. We're here, this is what we want. We want you to skinny that down. This is one we wanna look at. And now let's look at 2, and now we just threw number 3 back into it. So now we're right back where we were when we started today. We're back at all 3, and so let's revise all 3 of them and come back. I think we need to get to a point where we decide this is one where we wanna go with, and let's see if we can skinny it down to meet the number you want.
Where's the third one, Jeff?
What's that?
Where's the
What do you
third
mean?
one? We're
Yeah.
looking at 3.
We're only looking at the
Oh, we're
second one.
looking at 2.
We're looking at the one and then Tom just said, and number 1 would be a good fit too.
No, he meant.
No, I meant-
Number 2.
Out of the highway department.
Oh,
first phase.
He
okay.
switched gears.
So we're through, okay, alright,
He
alright.
switched gears.
My apologies, I'm just saying, you come in here with 3 or 4 and now we're going back out with 3, that just didn't make sense. I see that looking at the number 2, I see where you're at there. But I'm thinking we don't wanna go back to 3 again because we're not making any progress.
No.
Okay, sorry.
Next time, Tom.
Okay, so back to 2, the changes will be connection to court, property storage space, increased classification, and see if we can get a pre-book included in there. Even if it means compromising some kitchen space or a receiver or 2. Fair?
And keep it at 25.
Always throw the challenge out there, right?
Does anybody have any concerns that within 15 to 20 years, probably the courthouse is gonna have to be redone? And if we build a jail on this current campus, it's really gonna restrict the county's ability to redo that courthouse. I mean, I don't, how old is the courthouse now?
Parts are different.
Depends if you are gonna build entirely new or do a remodel on what we have.
Right. Right. But if we have a jail on this block, it's gonna restrict what we can do to the courthouse in 15, 20 years too, just to keep it that line.
It's just still be where that
I
line.
guess, we're gonna have to concentrate on what we need to look at right now.
But that's the problem that this county's been doing for 50 years, is they look at the problem right in front of them, not the problem they're gonna have in 15, 20 years. Like, there's been zero master
Our
planning.
county was rich and we had a ton of money, probably would be richer, but we're not.
I know, but that's why it's so important, two master plans, because we don't have a lot of money.
Well, let's just run with these, if there is, you're not, I hear what you're saying, Phil, I'm on the same page with you, because I don't want to be the same guy that made this decision 20 years ago, and here we are sitting at this table.
Regardless, that's inevitable. I mean, I think that's something that's just simply inevitable. And you can't build something that's gonna, be okay down 50 years down the road. It's just, it just doesn't
Do
happen.
we need this one motion to decide what we're gonna do, or we just kind of
Yeah,
what
no,
we're gonna do?
just give us
Okay,
direction.
so is the direction to look at number 2, we'll call it 4, because we don't have it on here.
Sure.
And let them do what they gotta do and come back and go back to it.
So we call it, what do you call it?
Technically 5,
Well, 5.
because you have 4 on here.
1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, 5.
It's working the previous plan over the down right size it
Downsize it.
even further.
And where was that gonna be located? Across the street.
I think the location we can determine later, we're really gonna scale it back.
Let's just let them get these plans.
We just told Jeff we're gonna concentrate on this.
Yeah.
Now you wanna look
Yeah,
at it?
but we know number 2.
Concentrate on
We picked number 2, and we picked that one. We already gave them the direction on that one. We already started it, so then we picked number 2. Now Kurt just wrote down the direction of what we want out of that one.
Alright, so this number 5, or what the hell ever it is, that's gonna require, if, they can't figure out something here for transport to courtroom, that's gonna require additional staff to transport them
That
from
one,
point A to point B, correct?
the one that's going across the street?
Yeah.
No, that's not gonna require.
If it were to go
Well,
out.
No, transport.
You transport either way, it's if we do it here or if we do it over there.
Well, no,
Well,
because
we're gonna try to
asking
find
them
a way to
see-
transport internally here.
See if
If there's a connection.
I'm not sure.
The crazy thing is, I understand what we're doing.
What motion do you want?
Just a quick question on the, back on the county shop. Where do we go if we decide to do something at the same time, where do we go from there, I mean?
I'm just giving you the ideas. I mean, I think that would be one of those things that you could talk about at the, I think if the highway committee would wanna talk about it as a process. We could have.
We can keep,
Okay. So then,
How much time, right? No, I mean, when do you want me to get? Hey Kyle, how much time do you think you need?
Might need. No,
3 weeks?
yeah, probably.
October 9th, would that work?
no, not for me.
So anyway, my question is, we were to acquire those 2 properties, that building could be flat.
You could stay with the Wednesday, that helps me. Certainly.
And say, the business continue as it is.
Potentially.
Yeah,
With the property. And And really, just due to the geometry, whatever master planning.
What are you looking at right now?
October 9th or the 16th.
So you are watching out of town that whole week, the 7th through the 11th.
Courts,
Right, the
that
whole.
could
So
go on there.
14th to 15th would work.
Then take the supermarket building.
Monday or Tuesday, 14th to 15th.
Right,
I'm trying to do Wednesday.
but you would have time
Yeah,
to
to your-
work with that place.
yes, to
Yeah,
your
we're watching out
point.
on your calendar for Wednesday.
I think
These are for sale.
Wednesday, 16th.
About the 9th.
Divide it
And
this
you
way,
gotta come that whole week.
this
Well, let's
way,
just go for,
Right.
Wednesday the 16th.
16th.
because we.
1 o'clock.
That's the next forestry one too. 15th, I think.
16th.
16th?
15th is forestry.
No, the 15th is forestry.
1 o'clock
Yeah.
again?
That works for me, that works for you guys.
Yeah, yeah. 1 o'clock sucks, but I'll make it work.
16th?
Yep, October 16th.
So when is this? October 16th.
Wednesday.
I may not be,
16th.
we'll see.
Mine did say I was up north working, right?
Yes.
So right now it's scheduled for October 16th at 1.
Yeah, that's a Wednesday. Be here.
I may be in Ashland. I don't know about the mornings. Go with it, because nobody else can. And I have a 4-hour board of directors meeting in 9 minutes. I have to leave. Sorry.
Thank you all, I appreciate the feedback.
So move.
Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.